Welcome to the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm Renée Lautermilch, Chief Editor at Smart Publishing, and this is the podcast where we explore all things writing, publishing, and the impact of storytelling. In each episode, I'll share insights and strategies to help you navigate the book journey, whether you're writing, publishing, or already an author. Plus, you'll hear from inspiring authors who are using their book to change lives. And if you're passionate about storytelling and ready to make an impact, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Now let's get started. Welcome back, everybody, to the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm your host, Renée Lautermilch, and today's guest is someone whose story is as powerful as his message, Jason T. Powell. And FYI, he goes by Jason T. Powell because apparently there's a serial killer in California with the same name, Jason Powell. I found that out as we were publishing his book, that it was really important for his author name to be Jason T. Powell, so nobody gets it confused. He'll probably mention that here in a little bit. He is the acclaimed author, not serial killer, acclaimed author of Compete to Live, the Everyman's Playbook to Beating Depression. With over 25 years as a high-level gymnastics coach and a competitor in everything from Golden Gloves boxing to golf and bass fishing, Jason knows what it means to push limits. But beyond his athletic achievements, he's also a stand-up comic, ladies and gentlemen, storyteller, speaker who brings a unique perspective to life's challenges. He used to write screenplays. He's done it all. So flipping back to his book, in Compete to Live, he shares his deeply personal battle with depression and how he turned to the competitive mindset that he has of an athlete to reclaim his life. His message is clear. Life is a competition, not against others, but against who you were yesterday. And through his story and the practical strategies that he provides throughout the book, he's helping men step up, take control, and fight for their own happiness. So today, we're going to dive into Jason's journey, what inspired him to write Compete to Live, and how his book is helping others transform adversity into strength. So, Jason, officially, welcome to the podcast. It's awesome to have you on.
Thank you. It's good to be here. It's good to be, I'm really shy about talking, so it's always hard to get me on these things. But, it's, wow, that was a great intro. I'm like, man, I want to be that guy. And then I was like, wait, I am that guy. Okay.
Yeah. So speaking of being that guy, I know your story really well because I edited your book. And so I know Jason from when he was a child and first discovered fishing and his passion for that, all the way up to now through his book. But our listeners don't. So I'd love to have you just summarize your story and what brought you to where you are today.
Okay, well, I was raised by four women. My mom and dad got divorced at a very young age, or when I was young, they got divorced, and my mom moved back to Northern Illinois. I was born in Southern Illinois. We moved back to Northern Illinois and moved in with my great-grandmother and grandmother, who at the same time, my aunt and uncle were just married. They were young. They were in their teens, and they had just got married. So they moved into the house too. So we had this big household. But most of my influences were all female because my uncle was never home. He was working constantly. He was working huge amount of hours per week. And so really I just went from one female figure to the other when someone could watch me. When they could watch me, I'm still a Gen Xer, so there was plenty of times nobody was watching me, and I was an awkward kid. I was out of shape. I had a huge appetite, and so I was always eating, but it was always something bad for me, and so I was kind of dumpy, and I had freckles, and so it kind of stuck right away that the kids in school will call me Fatty Freckle Face. So they're not real original at that age, but they are harsh. So I'm so blessed that my kids are from my spawn, so they don't put up with bullying and stuff like that. But back then, bullying was every day. So I went through that. I was a pretty sweet kid from what people told me. And then it with the teasing and the bullying and everything else, ADHD and dyslexia, it didn't help that then I had to be pushed over to special classes for dyslexia for part of the day. So not only was I fatty freckle face, I was the stupid kid too. So it got rougher and rougher. And what a lot of people don't realize is kids with ADHD, especially, besides the constant in your head, the thing people don't put up with, they can deal with the scatterbrained, they can deal with looking at multiple things at the same time, they can deal with the situation changes. What they can't deal with is the emotional outbursts. And when I would get frustrated, I would have these emotional outbursts, and people turn to that really quickly because it scares people. And so I was alone for a lot of that time. All I had was family members. My cousins were mean to me. And this isn't a pity party. This is just the reality of the situation. And I wouldn't give it up, actually, because it's made me who I am today. So I'm not, and trust me, there's so many people out there who have it so much worse than I ever did. Oh no, they called me freckle faced fatty, big deal. There's kids that don't get meals. So I know how good I had it, because even though my household was very, there wasn't a lot of hugging. There wasn't a lot of, my grandmother and grandmother were very tough people. They grew up in Mississippi. They had to handle the farm all by themselves because my great grandfather was paralyzed in World War I. And so they had the whole farm to themselves. They were killing copperhead snakes and farming every day of their life. My great grandmother still worked in the garden at 82 years old, even if it was 100 degrees outside. So they were tough people. There wasn't a lot of hugging going on. There wasn't a lot of loving going on. And I was a very empathetic, emotional kid. So I didn't really have an outlet for that. Plus, I didn't see any male dealing with those emotions. And I definitely didn't see my great grandmother dealing with those emotions. So then it, moved on. High school, I moved around a lot. My mom remarried. And so we moved around everywhere. And so I can't remember how many times I had to change schools, but that doesn't help. Everything going on and on and on. It just, I never made connections. I never had this deep meaning to anything until I found competition. I tell a story in the book about the first time I see a bass and bass fishermen, and how I was just enthralled because I grew up on Babe Winkleman and Bill Dance and In Fisherman and Outdoor Life magazine. And I grew up on all these things that I never got to do because I lived in Chicago. But I was so fascinated with fishing. And that started taking hold. And then once that took hold, other sports started taking hold. And what really shaped me, I was in football, but that didn't really shape me who I was. Wrestling turned me into who I was, because anybody who has wrestled at that level, just high school, will tell you it's a cult. It's not some athletes that just tend to hang out. They can make fun of you, they can bully you, but nobody else better bully you. And then of course all my baby fat melted. And then my baby fat melted, and all of a sudden I had, an athlete body, and all of a sudden people stopped calling me names, but I was still alone. I still didn't have any real connections. And that made it very difficult going on from there. And you learn to be a loner, and you learn to think inside your head and always be in your head about everything. I saw a quote the other day about ADHD, and it hit home because he talked about, if I say something to you and you walk away or ignore what I say, I assume you 100% dislike me, not that you're having a bad day, things are going on. Maybe you didn't hear what I said, I don't assume any of that. I assume I must annoy you. And therefore, since I annoy you, I will now go into do not speak until spoken to mode. And then you get into that mode, and now people are like, well, what's wrong with him? He's brooding all the time. What's all this? Who does he think he is, Johnny Depp? And it just got worse from there, and inside my head all the time. And then my family kicked me out of the house. I was 21 or 2. I had a girlfriend, and I talked to her on the phone at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I woke my aunt up. And my aunt came out and said, you are not considerate. You don't care about anybody else but yourself, which what 21-year-old does. Think about anybody other than themselves. And so she kicked me out. And that was the first time I had my first real hardcore depression hit. I was always depressed up to that point, but that was the first time I tried to hurt myself, and I got institutionalized. And talk about feeling alone. But that's kind of that's when I started having the inklings of becoming who I am. My competitiveness started coming through, and I started viewing it as I have to be better, and that I had to have faith that it was going to get better from there. Luckily, after all that went down, I ended up moving to Texas, and Texas fed my soul in so many different ways, from fishing to competitive. I boxed here, I kickboxed here. It's just such a great place to be if you're any kind of athlete. And it's a unique place to be if you really need your soul fed. I would like to say everything was perfect from there on out. It wasn't. It started building. I like to tell people, and I believe I say it in the book, you could tell me, you're the editor, that I really wasn't born until about 35 years old. I did not feel like Jason T. Powell until I was probably about 35, 36. And a lot of things happened at that time. I met my wife at that time. I won my first golf tournament at that time. And I turned a corner on who I was as a human being. And I'm happy to say since then, since I've known my wife, and I've had bouts of down, but I haven't had bouts of hardcore depression. And I've lived my life since about 35 of I'm just trying to get a little bit better than I was yesterday. And here's the thing, Pete, there's two lies everybody tells us, right? The first one is it's not that simple. It's always simple. The answer you're looking for is always simple. The answer doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy. It's simple though. So I look in the mirror, I don't like who I see. Well, the simple solution is you go to the gym and you work out. That's not easy, but it's very, very simple. The answers are very simple. And a lot of times we just don't want to see the answers. You're lonely? Go out. Kick up conversations in the middle of Sam's Club or Costco or Walmart. I do it all the time. I actually had a girl break up with me because I start conversations everywhere I go. But if you're lonely, start conversations. Ask people to go places. We're afraid to put ourselves out there. And I lost my train of thought. I'm thinking what the second thing is. That's so the lie. Oh, the biggest lie is that it's not that simple. It's always that simple. And usually the solution is always that simple. Whether you're CEO of a corporation or I don't want to down on any other career, because I just talked about this yesterday, how if you wait tables, you probably you are developing the best people skills you can possibly have on the planet, and the best organization skills. Because I was talking to a girl and she said, well, I'm just a waitress. I'm like, oh, whoa. First off, you're good at what you do. Take pride in that. And second, waiting tables might be one of the hardest jobs on the face of the planet.
I've done it. Yeah.
You know what? I know very few successful people that haven't waited tables. Very few. There. If you made a list of the most successful people that have waited tables, it'd be an impressive list. And I bet it'd be a really good friends list also.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's really, it's so good for life skills. I mean, my wife even waited tables, and my wife is not, I guarantee it was not easy for her. She is not waiting tables kind of girl. She just doesn't. I'm like, what? Didn't people just get up and leave? Because she's so matter of fact, because she's a doctor. Everything's like this. Everything's like, you know, I'm like, how'd you make conversation? Like,
she got in and out. She took the order and then she was out.
She took the order, told them they're wrong, and then left.
So this is what you really need.
She does that to me every day. So, but it really is. It really is. Your solution, you might not want to hear it, but your solution's always pretty simple. And people lie about it all the time. Oh, the second thing is, if you decide, if your solution is simple and you decide, I'm going to be better than I was yesterday, and you want to be 1% better every day, motivational speakers will tell you, cool, do that. What they won't tell you is there's going to be days you fail. There's days that I slip backwards and I look in the mirror and I'm not better than I was yesterday. And be it I lost my temper with my kids, or it usually has something to do with an emotional outburst. But because I still have ADHD, so and I'm not medicated for it. So as you can tell, but people need to be prepared for that. I think one of the reasons depression slips in on people is because, especially you and I have seen this trend. It's totally different than when I was a kid, of everybody gets a trophy, everybody succeeds, everybody just for showing up. Well, you can't get it for just showing up. You can get it for just showing effort. If you show up and you give 100%, absolutely, you deserve some sort of accolade for that. But what about these kids that show up for one practice out of the whole season, show up for half a game, and then, oh, by the way, can you give so-and-so our trophy so they can bring it home for us? And they're never around, but they still get a trophy for it. Now we're getting a trophy for not even showing up. Now we're getting a trophy for just being. And quite frankly, that's not good enough for the world. And the world's not gonna take that. And if everybody stands around and says, well, we can't offend, you have a right to never be offended as long as you live. I was offended from the time I was old, from my first day of kindergarten, probably first day of preschool. I just can't remember it. I'm sure I was offended every day all the way through until the first time I wrestled and I got my athlete body and everybody started leaving me alone. Like, I was offended that whole time. And I had to learn to deal with it. Dealing with the world and dealing with how the world reacts to us is one of the most crucial skills sports gives us. And if we take that away, where are we at the end of the day? And then we wonder why depression's through the roof and anxiety's through the roof. And well, I'd have anxiety too if every time I turned around I was afraid somebody's going to say something that hurts my feelings. But we can't live like that. And people tell you you can't, and then they tell you won't fail. You won't fail. You'll be better every day of your life. You will be a better person no, you won't. You got to give yourself, and you got to forgive yourself. for failing every once in a while. And if you don't, you're going to have a really hard time. So you're going to have a lot more to forgive yourself for.
Yeah, I think it's interesting hearing you talk about it's almost like a muscle, you know, and if kids aren't developing that resilience muscle from a young age, then when they're met with things that are truly tough, they don't have the coping skills. They haven't developed coping skills. I think the number one thing that stood out to me as a parent while I was reading your book is how some of these insidious things seep their way into people's heads, and it starts so young. The things that as a parent you do or you don't do with and for your child, you know, when they're young, really, really, really shape them. Because I know you talk about in the book where like that's where that negative self-talk started. It started from the time you were a kid, and it festered and it grew into, you know, something that at times for you spiraled out of control because you
Really
didn't
bad.
know, you know, you didn't know how to deal with it. It was just that heavy. You're a parent. How did your own experience of how you reflected on the way that you were sort of shaped and molded and those experiences that you know made you who you are, how did that shape who you became as a parent?
I think it shaped everything I did as a coach and a parent, because coaching and parenting are very, very similar.
Good point.
And so I started as a coach first, and my first goal was not to be the coach that I had my whole life, which I was good enough to be on the team and I was bad enough to ignore. And I don't blame that on the coaches 100%. If you have these great athletes and you have a kid that doesn't want to try as much, you ignore them. It's like if you have a soda machine and you go to the same soda machine every day and you put in $1 and nothing comes out, and then you go to another soda machine, you put in $1 and 2 sodas come out, you're going to that soda machine, right? And so coaches are just reflecting what they're getting. And I wanted to be pushed, but I didn't know how to ask for it. And so I just knew I didn't want to be that coach. I wanted to recognize athletes and see athletes for who they were. And if they needed to be pushed, I wanted to be able to push them in a positive way, of course. I don't want it to get lost. I don't want it to get lost that if I'm against participation trophies, that I must be one of those coaches that's screaming and pushing and doing all those things. I believe in very positive reinforcement. I believe in hugging. I believe in telling them how good they are. I believe in getting to that self-talk and being able to see the signals when you see an athlete or your child, when you see them, that negative self-talk get in their head. Even as a parent, but as a parent, what I learned was, and coaching helped me with this too, is I'm very hands-off when it comes to his coaching, my son and my daughter. My daughter horseback rides, and Miss Brenda, her horseback riding coach, is the first and foremost. That what she says goes. Whether I agree with it or not, that's who I chose to coach my child. That's who's coaching my child. And I'm the same way with my son. My son has a lot of different coaches because he's in a lot of different sports. But it's very terrifying to go through what I went through with depression and anxiety and self-talk and have children. I was terrified. I didn't have my first child till I was 40 years old. And there were nights I stayed up and there were tears shed over the fact that I passed on that I have, this depression, this anxiety that I have. I was afraid I pushed it on. And so it's a struggle for me and my daughter, because my daughter is me 100%. except without the beard. Poor girl. Inherited everything. Looks, body type, attitude, sarcasm. She is tough as nails, but at the same time, as sensitive can be. My son's just sensitive. He is, but he's also terrified. He's the exact opposite when it comes to that. He is terrified of being in trouble. I hate authority. To this day, I hate authority. If I'm already doing the dishes and you say, hey, do the dishes, I'm throwing the dishes on the floor. I hate authority. I do not do authority. And you have to be in my circle to be able to tell me what to do or how to do something. And I try to deal with that on different levels. My son is the exact opposite. If your name is coach or dad or mom or teacher, whatever you say goes, and he'll do it. I was blessed with that. He's my oldest. I hear most first children are like that. My daughter, on the other hand, will burn down the house if there's a spider in it. I remember a very specific point where my son was out front and there was this little boy down the street and they were shooting baskets, and this little boy comes over and this little boy swore a lot. Well, my son's a rules follower, so it made him very uncomfortable. So I said, you are more than welcome to say, if you're going to swear and talk like that, you can't hang out with us. Well, he did that very politely, and he was with two of his friends and my daughter. And so this little boy goes back home and he tells his sister and his cousin, who are both 16 and 17. Well, they come down and now my kids are only like 10 at the time. My son's like 10, which means my daughter's 8. And there's this big rigmarole, and one of the cousins punch one of my son's friends. So I'm upstairs. It's middle of the summer. I'm not working that day. It might have even been during COVID. And so I hear them come in the house, and all I can hear is my daughter at the top of her lungs. Just tell my dad he's not going to care. Like, he won't get mad. And I'm like, I'm like, what happened? So they tell me the whole story. So I send my son's friends home, and, I'm like, day's over. Let's just, you guys go home, because their dad was home too. So I call their dad and I'm like, hey, what happened? And he kind of gave me the whole story because his sons told him the whole story. Because trying to hear it from my kids is like, Yeah. So anyway, I asked him the story. I go, just tell me. Tessa is my daughter's name. Did Tessa start it? He goes, no, but from what I heard, she was so willing to finish it. He goes, after that girl punched my son in the face, because these were girls too, punched him in the face, he said, my daughter lost her mind and was like, oh, you want some? And like jumped between his son and this 17-year-old girl. And it's like, if you want some, we can finish this right here. And was like, and my son's like pulling her back. And she's 8 at the time.
The Chihuahua.
She is. She's a Chihuahua. And luckily, she's actually growing. So at least maybe she'll get to the size of a, strong Labrador. But she'll do it to me. Like, she can't stop herself. So obviously she has inherited more of me than my son has. So I try to be patient. I went out of my way especially when they were first born. I cried like a baby when my son was born. I mean, I was like, there were so many emotions that were coming forward. And I swore from that day that things that happened in my house growing up were not going to happen in our house. We're very touchy-feely. I hug my son just for no reason, and he's like, Dad, stop. Same thing with my daughter. My daughter really gets angry if I hug her. We're not, how do I put it? Everybody kind of had their own apartment when I was growing up. Like, I never went into anybody else's room. I definitely never saw anybody running across the house in their underwear. Like I didn't even know anybody in my house had skin because they were always, my house is not like that. That's too much information for y'all, but
more comfortable with each other.
Yeah, I walk around in nothing but shorts. My kids are like, "Hey, I'm taking a bath or shower in your room," and we'll walk through my room naked. And I'm like, I thought this was my room. The boundaries are set totally different because a lot of those boundaries put that anxiety in my head. Like, if you invade someone else's boundaries, that makes you a bad person, and it doesn't. So a lot of times it's just accidental. You walk into a room, somebody was in there doing something. It's not like you're trying to invade their privacy. You're like, oh, sorry, and you walk out. There wasn't a lot of forgiveness growing up in my house, and all my negative talk isn't my voice. When I have negative talk, if you really pay attention to negative talk, it's somebody else's voice. You usually have about 5 people in your head. You have 5 people that really shape who you are. And a lot of times you hear those voices. And I think one of the keys to depression, one of the keys to thriving after depression is to change that committee and change who those people are. And it's hard to do, but you can catch yourself. And you can catch yourself and say, no, you don't have a say in what I do or who I am. And you change who that person is. And so I've changed the committee over a period of time. Sometimes it's even your husband who pushed me into. He didn't push me, but he was always. I met him. It was a while ago. I was still doing personal training, and he would not let me give up on me. Even after I told him, look, dude, I don't want to train people. I don't want to do it. And he's like, I know. He goes, that is not your calling. But he goes, but you have a calling, and I'm not going to let you sit here and not follow it. And so he always, even if I didn't talk to him for a month or two, there'd be a pop-up in my instant messages that was like, hey, bro, what are you doing? Like he held me accountable. And I'm in a lot of groups now that hold me accountable and are like, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to, I think you need that. I personally need male role models, even at 53 years old. I need other dudes that say, hey, it's okay to be this, but you have to do this because you said you would do it. And so I tend to follow through with that. Without you and your husband, my book doesn't get written.
Well, let's switch to talk about that then. What inspired you to write the book? Because obviously we didn't come to you and say, hey, Jason, here's the book you're going to write.
No,
that was already in you.
Yeah.
What inspired you? How did that sort of come together in terms of like, you know what, I feel really strongly about this, and this is a book that I need to write?
Well, I actually failed miserably at my first attempt before Smart Publishing was around.
I didn't realize you tried to write a book before that.
I did.
Maybe we talked about that before, but my mom brain is not remembering.
In a totally different direction than I wanted it to. And it just started flying all around the place. And I was like, there has to be some kind of direction to this. And I always knew I wanted to write a book. I had written screenplays. I had written a sitcom. Yeah. I loved writing since I was a little kid. I remember my first real writing experience was in the English class in, I want to say it was 8th grade. And my teacher made me read it aloud. And then when I finished, she said, I just wanted everybody else to realize what terrible nonsense this was. And I wanted to make sure I wasn't the only one that totally couldn't understand anything in it. I'm dead serious. A teacher. And I was like, oh. And so
there's one of those voices.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's one of those voices.
Luckily, I didn't like her very much, so she didn't stay there. I remember her
carry weight with
saying
you.
it, and then I remember that was one of the few times in my life where I was like, "You're an idiot." Like, and I think a lot of writers have that in common, that they'll write something and somebody will be like, "This makes no sense." And you're like, "That's just because you can't get it." I mean, I'm sure Ernest Hemingway was like that, who's one of my favorites. But so I always loved writing. And you guys actually, Jonathan was like, "Hey, we're doing this book. Do you want to write a chapter?" You guys were doing a collective,
Yeah, that's right. A
collaborative,
collaboration. Yeah.
and then we ended up not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like,
Yeah,
"Dude,
that was the one on leadership. We didn't get enough people interested in writing a chapter on
yeah,
leadership, which
yeah," which is the number one public speaking thing people talk about.
go
And I
figure.
love leadership. You know, from all my years of coaching, I've actually done public speaking on leadership and
Yeah.
the tools of comedy and how it helps with leadership.
Yeah.
And so I was going to write a chapter about that. And Jonathan's like, "Hey, it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I really think you should write your own book." And I'm like, "Well, I actually had a ghostwriter the first time. And
Oh, wow.
Jonathan actually recommended and it fell through. And I guess the similar thing happened with him. And so he was like, "Hey, look, I'm going to hook you up with Renee. You and Renee are going to get together." But he goes, "But once I set that boulder in motion, it's going to happen because Renee's not going to let you fall to the wayside. She's going to be like, 'Hey, where's this? Where's this? Where's this?'" And
Is that why? And so listeners, when Jason was writing, he was sending like 2-3 chapters a day. And so was it the fear of me coming after you that spawned? Because you had no problem writing and getting stuff across.
Yeah, it wasn't the fear. I think that was just
okay. I'm not very scary
of it. Well, you're not intimidating. You're at all. I mean, you're definitely a positive voice in my committee. So it wasn't that. It wasn't that I was fearful. It might be that I was trying to impress you a little bit.
I was very impressed.
So the way it happened is I met with you on a Tuesday, and you told me and I never had direction before you. Like, and you gave me the direction. I'm like, "Oh, that's just how I write a screenplay. That's exactly the same way. Why didn't I ever think of doing that with a book?" And then what happened with the book is there was a PGA player. I was in the shower, and I always have ESPN on because I'm a sports guy. And a PGA player was here in Fort Worth at Colonial and had a good, decent 2 days, pulled out on the 12th hole on Saturday, I believe, went to his hotel and committed suicide.
I remember that. Yeah.
And from an athlete, from someone who's strived at golf since he was in his 20s and had been somewhat successful at it, and had numerous people tell me, by the way, well, I was like, well, if I keep practicing, maybe I could get on the pro tour, on the senior tour when I'm 50. And I had people in the golf industry be like, "Yeah, that can't happen. That won't happen." Talking about negative talk again. But I heard that. And he was engaged to be married. He had already won twice on the PGA Tour. He had a life that if a genie popped up in front of me, I might wish for. And it wasn't good enough for him because of this terrible thing of depression. Nothing he went back to his hotel room and thought that day was true. It wasn't true. His parents were both very supportive parents. I mean, he had a lot of things going for him. And that shows you how insidious depression is, because he had something I would dream of. And then I look and I see other people dreaming of what I have: children, dogs, a house,
Mm.
nice car. I get to run a nonprofit. I get to be on podcasts like this. I wrote a book. People would dream of my life. And so I'm like, I'm done. Starting that day, that's when after that shower, dried off, put on some clothes, and I messaged Jonathan and I said, I'm ready to go. Let's go. I got to do this book. And then that Tuesday, you and I met, and you were like, this is how you do it. I need an outline by the end of this week. I need your first chapter. I can't remember your timeline you gave me. 2 weeks, 3 weeks? I don't remember. And I finished the outline that day. And I think I sent you a chapter that night. I think I sent you an outline and the first chapter that night. And I think I was done with all 13 chapters in about, I don't remember how long it took. 8 days, 9 days. I don't know.
It wasn't long. It was like a record. It was, you may still hold the record. The fastest book written, but it just shows you that, like, when it's a mission, when it's something that you believe strongly in, like, it just came out of you.
Yeah.
Like, once you had the direction, once you had the structure, once you understood that 30,000 foot view of what this looks like from start to finish, that clarity mixed with that passion, it just, and you were writing too. You weren't even one of our authors who's recording the
No,
transcription.
I wrote.
Should you have done that, that would have been like 3 days,
Yeah, I know. I typed it all out. I think better that way. If I either actually
Yeah,
write,
same.
if I actually write, or if I type.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's still on all the rough drafts still on my computer. It flowed, and really once the outline was done, the book was done in my head. And then that's probably the worst depression I've had since I was 35 was when I finished the book. Because it was like I ripped open this wound and the nerves were exposed. So I had to go through it too. I had to rehash those stories and kind of bring them to an end because they were just festering inside of me, obviously, and they were just sitting there. And so anybody that thinks about writing a book, that thinks about putting those thoughts on paper, just do it and get it out. You will be relieved. There was a hard week when I finished, and then I think it was the day it was actually published. It was hard between the date I finished, finishing the editing, and then the day it released. And then the day it released, it was a release. There's a reason they call it the release day. Because it was this huge release. Like those chapters of my life were done and they were over. And then the thought that it might help one person was enough for me. And then the people that have reached out to me since then.
Yeah, what's the response been?
Yeah, it's been, and the people that read the title, it just happened at my charity event. The people that read the title and they're like, oh, how much is this? Like, there's so many people in silence that don't want anybody to know that they're dealing with this depression. And it's not just for men, but men tend to be the ones that don't say anything.
Right.
Like they tend to let it fester.
White knuckle it.
That's who it was gauged towards. Plus, I'm not a woman. And being raised by 4 women, I know how different men and women are. Like, so I can't speak on it. So that's why I geared it towards men. But I've had so many women since I've released it that were like, I don't know why it says every man's playbook, because it's every person's playbook.
Yeah.
I'm like, great. If it helped you, it helped you. I didn't mean for it to only be for men, but it just kind of came out. It just happened that way.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. If you need to write, you got to write. There's been times when it's been fiction or it's been a screenplay but this one was purpose driven for sure from day one. Because I saw that about the PGA player. And how many people since I've published the book, I'm like,
right.
oh, and now it's kind of even my kids, because they know what the book is about.
Yeah.
They're like, so-and-so is dealing with depression, dad, or so-and-so's uncle or whatever just had a tragedy. And it's just, it's frustrating from the standpoint that if we would just open our mouths and talk, it would get better. It wouldn't cure it. You can't cure it. But when other people can share that and put it on their back, I think I posted that a few days ago. I'm not a big social media guy, but I'm trying to get better at it. And I posted that I rather help carry your burden on my back than carry your coffin on my shoulder. And it's true. I don't ever want those terrible, I'm getting emotional, those terrible nights in institutions by yourself. And Texas is a lot of things. A place to be institutionalized is not one of them. It's one of the worst places. I think it's 48th on the list out of 50. They actually tore it down. That was a big day in my life. I was driving home from baseball with my son after a game, and I turned the corner, and the building that I had to spend a 3-day hold in was gone. They tore it to the ground. And my room in that was like a jail cell. I mean, everything was concrete. The bed was metal. It was, and then the 3 a.m. just sitting there, unable to sleep, I don't want anybody to go through that.
Just the idea of like, how is that supposed to help? Like,
that's mental health in the state of Texas is not on par with the rest of things that are good about Texas. I've been institutionalized in 2 different states. I was in the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota and here in Texas. And I can tell you right now, shadow of the doubt, Mayo Clinic is spectacular. It's almost like going to I don't want to say a resort because I don't want to belittle it, but it's nice. Everything's real nice. They have plenty of things for you to do. They have an exercise bike and an exercise room. They have a gym, and we would go in there and play basketball in between therapy sessions or in between group. It was I don't want to say great. It was a really hard time in my life, but they make it as comfortable as possible. And they're
focused on rehabilitation.
Yeah. It's not like Texas, you feel like you did something wrong.
It's like, it's punitive. Yeah.
And I think a lot of that just is misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And I mean, it really helps now that so many NFL players are coming out and PGA Tour players and all these guys who men look up to. AJ Brown just came out and talked about his mental health issues. It's important that they do that. I remember it was big for me because Brandon Marshall, who was a wide receiver for the Chicago Bears, came out, and they wouldn't let him wear shoes that signified his struggle with mental health. The NFL was like, you can't wear those shoes. And then now they have it where you can wear the shoes of any charity that you support. They do that at least once. I think it's 1 game a year. You're allowed to wear shoes of any color, any that signify your charities, no matter what they are. But that's big. I think people that lead need to let people know that you're not the only one dealing with this self-doubt. So, and with that being said, on that same line, it's real hard to get better if you don't follow your purpose. And writing the book was my purpose. And so anybody that has a purpose out there, whether it's writing a book or doing a podcast or doing whatever your dream is, do it and follow it. And if you want to be an author, write. That's all you have to do to be an author. All you got to do is write.
Yeah.
Because nothing else can happen without that first step, which is writing.
Mhm.
And if you write and then you go to Smart Publishing and you say, hey, edit this because I'm terrible at editing. And then you'll have Renée be like, okay, this, and this. Hey, doofus, change this. And you have someone to partnership with you and get it done. And once you get it done, the release, there's a reason they call it release date. I'm telling you, is because
I've never thought about it that way until now.
yeah, it just, everything came off my shoulders, and to be a published author is it's cool. People definitely, it's just like when I'm in shape. When I'm in shape, and when I tell people I'm an author, there's a total change in how they like react.
Yeah, how they look at you. Yeah,
Like,
because
the
you're in this
credibility automatically is there.
for
Even though
sure.
I'm no different than I was before the book. But
Just about everybody wants to write a book, but very few actually do it.
It's, what is it, 1% of the population?
It's a little bit less than 1% of people surveyed who, are interested in writing a book have actually written a book.
It's and write it on anything. People,
Yeah.
One of my wife's best friends wrote one on marathoning, how to run marathons.
Yeah.
Like, don't you just
Everybody
listen
has
to one
something.
page? It said
Yeah.
run. I don't.
You just start running.
Yeah, just like writing, just go.
Yeah.
But yeah, she wrote a book on that, and I'm like, why? And she's like, I just always wanted to write a book about running.
Yeah.
Great.
Everybody has at least one thing, if not multiple, because I will tell you, writing one book is the gateway drug to writing more books.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The minute you get over that mountain and you're like, I did this is possible, and it's not as hard as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden it's like, now I got this other idea and I should do this other thing.
There's times I sit around and I'll be talking to somebody and I'll be like, oh, I'll put that in the second book. I'm like, oh wait, what? I'm doing another book? What's going on?
Or you can do additions. You can do a second edition of your first book, so that's another option as well.
Yeah. Well, I read my book on my podcast. That's what I started doing, because everybody wanted me to do an audiobook. And I'm like, I have a podcast. Why don't I just read each chapter and then I'll discuss the chapter? And it took 24 minutes for me to read the first chapter. I just put out the first episode, and it took me 24 minutes. And the funny thing is, when I'm reading it, I'll add things that are actually already in the book. And then I'm like, oh, I actually say that. So I just repeated myself.
Yeah. But I guess it came out of your brain.
Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, it did come out of my brain. And so it's very ADHD when I read it on my podcast, but I wanted it to be that way because I kind of want people to understand how my mind works. And that's why one of the chapters in the book, I didn't self-regulate or anything. I mean, I'm all over the place in the chapter. And then you put in there, by the way, this is how his brain works.
It's a good chapter though.
It is. I mean, I love my ADHD now. I hated it when I was a kid. Yeah. It was hard to make friends and do all that stuff. But
and they're trying to push you into that public school box, and most of us just don't work that way.
Do not get me started on public schools.
That'll be the next episode.
My son is a prime example why public schools will never work for the masses. Because he gets good grades because he has to. Because to play baseball, he has to have good grades. and he wants to play in high school and everything else. But he panics if he gets a 77 on a test. He panics because he's like, "What? I can't play baseball, or I can't do this, or I can't do that." And
so much gravity to it.
well, and he's not a sitter. He's not. You can't sit him down and say, "Focus on what I'm saying for the next 4 hours."
Yeah. No, who wants to
He
do
used
that?
to have what was called getting the heavies. He called it getting the heavies. And he'd be in class, and it was during lectures. He said he would feel like there was a boulder on top of him, and that he just had to move because he couldn't breathe. And all that. So, I mean, he had to end up going to therapy for it. Luckily, he outgrew it. But it's boys. I'm not saying, girls are easier to institutionalize, but they're pleasers, and they want to please. And then you have these boys. It was just like when I coached gymnastics. I only coached female athletes because they're pleasers and they want to get the work done and they want to do well. Boys want to flip. That's it.
Yeah, they just want to go and do. Yeah.
I want to swing on that rope. I want to grab that bar and I want to fling myself across the gym and land on my head. I want to do that.
Sounds about right.
That's it. That's how they want to do.
Boys and like any toddler, because my 2-year-old is like she'll listen for a little bit, but she's like, no, I'm gonna go over here and do this.
Tessa never listened. My daughter never ever.
Yeah.
We have video of her at she was barely old enough to walk and talk. She's still waddling around. That's a great age, by the way, when they're just waddling.
So cute. They're adorable.
Their feet go faster or their head starts going forward faster than their feet.
Because their heads are huge compared to their body at that age.
So she's at that age. And her mom is like, what do you want for dinner? And she's like, I don't know. She goes, you want hot dogs? She goes, no, damn it. And she's like, do you want, I don't remember what she used to eat. Peanut butter and jelly? She's like, no, damn it. And this went on for 6 things. And yeah, it's cute, but it's going to become a problem.
Uh-huh.
And it has. And she's only 10. She's going to be 11 this month. I don't know what we're going to do when she's 16.
I was going to say, she's not even a teenager yet.
Oh, she's going to be, she's crazy.
Oh, goodness.
She's crazy. It's in a good way. But, and it's in a way, it's a struggle as a father. Because I know she's going to need that spirit. And I know she's going to need that fight. And I know she's going to need all that in a world that's going to tell her she's not good enough. So how do I discourage it at this age? No, you have to listen to me, but don't you dare listen to the rest of that world. Yeah. How do you find that medium? Well, we struggle with it because she says things to me that I'm like, are you out of your mind? Who do you think you're talking to? I'm like, what? And she, at the same time, I'm like, yeah, that's what I would have said to me too.
Exactly.
That makes it really hard. That makes it really hard.
Oh man. So let's land the plane here.
Yeah.
What are you working on now? And where can people find you?
Okay. So Compete to Live is the name of the book. And I started a nonprofit organization called Compete to Live. That it started out where it was just going to send people that get diagnosed with depression on day trips, a guided fishing trip or a golf, or help get them into golf and take them on a day of golf, everything local. And just kind of help them with find hobbies. A major goal of it is if we send them on a guided fishing trip, we actually give them some fishing equipment too. So if there's a bad day and they need to get away, they can just go off to a local pond and fish from the bank. It started there, and now it has morphed. Now it has morphed into helping pay for therapy for people that don't have health insurance.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so it's kind of morphed into that. We just got okayed for our 501c3. So
Congratulations.
yeah, thanks. It was a big deal.
Yeah.
We're an official charity. So that was a big deal. That was a crazy day. Talk about because depression 3 days before I got the letter from the IRS was telling me to stop
Mm,
and stop doing this. And I'm like, I can't stop. It's not about me.
right.
It's my purpose, but I can't stop because what about that one person we're going to help? So that's Compete to Live. It's been a journey already. It just started in October. But yeah, the fact that we already got our 501c3 is huge. And we're having our first major golf tournament April 21st
Awesome.
in Prosper at Gentle Creek Golf Course. And so we've started taking whole sponsors, and we have some teams registered already. It's going to be a good day. It's going to be fun. I'm going to run the golf tournament the way I wish golf tournaments were run for me. So it'll be a blast. We'll get breakfast and lunch. But I mean, that takes up 95% of my time now. If they need to find us for the golf tournament, it's competetolivegolf.com is the landing page.
Awesome.
And that's just for the golf tournament. Competetolive.org is going to be our website that's still being built right now. If they need to get a hold of me, they can find me on Facebook or Instagram. Coach J Powell or Coach J Powell. J Powell. Sorry, Coach J Powell 71 on Instagram, and then just Jason T Powell on Facebook. And then we're starting a YouTube channel. That's Compete to Live
Awesome.
YouTube channel, where we're actually gonna go to local ponds and find people that are bank fishing and actually give them fishing equipment.
That's
So,
incredible.
and fishing tips, whatever they want. So
It's just amazing to see. It all started with the book, and then it's
yeah,
just,
the book. Well, I'm getting ready to. I'm actually been applying to TEDx talks to do a
oh
TEDx
yeah,
talk
that's right.
on class clowns. That's what I do my
Mm,
talk on. I used to talk about leadership systems and how comedy helped me develop effective leadership systems. And
yeah.
now it has morphed into this identifying class clowns and realizing there's more behind the humor
Hmm.
than just the goofiness.
Oh my
So
goodness, that could be a whole episode in and of itself.
yeah. So I'm
Yeah,
doing public speaking stuff too.
yeah,
That website's also being worked on right now, jasontpowell.com. So I'm doing a lot of stuff. And I'm raising two kids
yeah.
because I stopped coaching. I stopped coaching competitive gymnastics.
Mm,
So I am the main caregiver. I'm the baseball driver, and
it's fun though.
3-4
That's
nights a week.
that's the important work.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's been an experience. My son and I have gotten much closer. My daughter and I, not so much. She she's just like, oh, good, I have someone to yell at right when I get home. So
It's
that's
the
awesome.
two like positive magnetic forces that,
It is. It's
yeah,
very, and I'm trying to stay that way. I think that's what we need more. And so I think that's what happened with participation trophies. By the way,
yeah.
I think we were trying to get everybody to be enthusiastic and positive,
Hmm.
and it just went because now you're being enthusiastic and positive for no reason whatsoever.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think I'm huge into enthusiastic and positive. I'm the loudest screamer when my kids are competing. I am the biggest supporter. There's been one time in Finn's, he's been playing t-ball since he was 3. So he's 12 now. And he's played spring and fall every year, including other sports, between football and basketball and everything else. There's been one time in the whole time where I've ever said I was disappointed in that effort. And it was that exactly. It was his effort. He gave almost zero effort. He acted like he didn't want to be there. He acted like he didn't care. And so I said, look, if you don't want to be there, let's not be there. Let's go find you something you love. And that was a hard season for him. And he actually thought about quitting. And now he eats, sleeps, and breathes baseball.
Yeah.
So, but I just told him I was disappointed in his effort.
Yeah.
I will never say he can go out and give up 5 home runs, 20 home runs, and drop 8 balls and strike out every time at the plate. I don't care. As long as it's with 100% effort, you know?
Yeah.
And so he understands that. And he's a much better competitor than I could ever dream of being. He's very even keel. He's not up and down, whether he's pitching or batting or any. I think I've seen him drop his head maybe 2 times the whole time he's played baseball, where he was like, oh, I'm no good. I tried to nip that in the bud at a very early age. So
yeah, that's good.
And I had to stop making fun of him because I'm a comedian at heart. And
it's hard. It's hard for you.
Yeah. Well, another dad pulled me aside and said, hey, I know you're just joking and I know everybody thinks it's funny, but just so you know, I think it hurts Finn every time you make a joke about him not being good or not doing that. And so I was like, oh, I got to stop that. And I went to him and apologized. I held accountability and I went to my 12-year-old and said, I'm sorry. I'm going to stop. I'm going to try and stop doing it. It's still going to happen every once in a while because that's who I am. But I don't believe it. I believe you're the best athlete I've ever met. So
it's great modeling for him on how to apologize. Yeah,
he's a good kid. My daughter's a good kid too. She just spirited.
You guys just are too similar.
She's just a colt. That's why I think she loves horseback riding so much.
Yeah.
I think she identifies a lot with horses. So she loves it. So she loves all animals. She's an animal person. So but even the animals are like, whoa, chill.
You're a little much.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Horses are so sensitive to energy.
Oh,
so if there's one message that you want to leave our listeners with, what would that message be?
Yeah. It's so cliche, but it's cliche because it's true. There is nothing stopping them from being whatever they want to be, need to be. Find your purpose, move forward with it, and follow it, and you'll be happy. Whether it makes you rich or poor, you'll be happy. But you got to find that purpose. And if you don't have a purpose, I would really start looking for it. Do some serious soul searching, and it's never too late. Morgan Freeman didn't get his first acting gig till he was 50 years old. There's multiple cases of people that didn't start companies until they were in their 50s or 60s. It's not over. That lie that they tell us when we're kids that we have to decide everything by 22 is so ridiculous that find it and just follow it. I mean, unless you're 50 years old and you're like, oh, I'm supposed to be a UFC fighter, you might have missed your window. But if it's something else, chances are you can follow it.
Other than being a UFC fighter.
Well, UFC, silly things like that. But you could be a trainer.
There you go.
You got to find your purpose. A lot of the things I did up until I wrote my book were getting me ready for what I'm doing now. I didn't realize it. They weren't my purpose, but they were serving a purpose, which was
your
to get me
preparation
ready for this. Yeah. It was like I was in training.
Yeah.
And a lot of us are in training until we're 40, 50 years old. Very few people find what they're going to do the rest of their life at an early age. So
that's a really good point. Man, wow. Well, what a message to end on then. I think, with that, that's a wrap for this episode, guys. The Smart Publishing Impact series. Thanks for joining me and our amazing guest, Jason T. Powell.
yes, I am not that killer in California.
Not the killer. As we explored his story, the impact his book and now his nonprofit is making. And remember, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an inspiring story or any of my solo episodes on all things writing and publishing. If you found value here, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. It helps us reach even more people who believe in the power of storytelling to change lives. So until next time, I'm Renée Lautermilch, reminding you to keep sharing your story because the world needs your voice.